The silence. Before the storm. The galaxy was quiet, too quiet, as if the stars themselves were holding their breath. Across countless systems, trade routes glowed with the usual traffic of freighters and merchant ships. But underneath that calm ran a strange tension. Something was wrong. Though no one dared to say it aloud, on Earth, deep inside the command halls of the United Terran Fleet, the signal came. It was faint, almost lost in static, but the technicians managed to clean it. When the words finally played across the chamber, every officer froze. It was not a request for help, it was a scream. Please. Anyone, they are here again. If you come, you will die. But if you don't, we all die. The voice was broken, terrified, not even naming the enemy. Just fear, pure and raw. Admiral Corrin, a man who had seen more battles than most could count, stood over the holographic display. The Council would tell them to ignore it. He knew that already. The Galactic Council always told humanity to stay back, to not interfere. But he also knew something the others did not. Humans never forgot. Around the chamber, younger officers whispered, their voices heavy with old anger. Stories passed down through families about how their ancestors had seen colonies destroyed, burned, erased from memory by a shadow fleet no one spoke of anymore. The Council had closed those records. They said the past was buried. But for humans, the past never died. Admiral Corrin lifted his eyes to the signal repeating across the chamber. The voice cracked again. Help us. They are coming. He clenched his fist. The choice already made. Prepare the fleet, he ordered, his voice steady. The room fell silent, then filled with movement. Orders carried down the lines, ships readied for launch, pilots awakened. From cryorest, Earth's war machine began to stir. The Council arrived quickly, of course. A dozen alien ambassadors filled the hall, their voices raised in panic. You cannot go, one shouted, his skin flashing red with anger. This enemy is beyond you. If you interfere, you risk bringing their wrath back upon all of us. Others nodded, some afraid, some angry, but all united in the same command. Do nothing. Admiral Corrin's eyes narrowed. Do nothing, he repeated softly. Then his voice grew cold. You told us the same when they destroyed our first colonies. You told us to hide, to forget, to move on. He leaned forward across the table, his voice now a blade. We never moved on. The ambassadors recoiled, silence stretching across the room. They saw something in the humans' eyes, something that unsettled them for centuries. Humans had built their fleets in silence, always smaller, always restrained. But there was a depth behind that restraint, a shadow that no one dared measure. When the Council left, furious but powerless, the fleet continued its preparations. Hangars, lit with fire and steel, massive carriers sliding free of their docks. Soldiers lined up, their armor black under the cold lights. Each man and woman carried the weight of stories told to them since childhood, of burning colonies, of voices cut off mid-scream, of a wound the galaxy thought forgotten. As the first warships rose from Earth's orbit, the people of the planet looked to the sky. Some whispered prayers, others clenched their fists in silence. They knew what this meant. Once more, humanity was answering a call no one else dared answer. Corrin stood on the bridge of the flagship, the Terran dreadnought Vanguard. Stars stretched endless before him. But his mind was on the words from that broken signal. If you come, you will die, but if you don't, we all die. He whispered the words again, but with steel instead of fear. Then we die fighting. Around him, the crew moved with quiet focus. The ship's engines roared, shaking the hull with power. Outside the viewport, the fleet aligned. Thousands of ships in dark formation, each one ready, each one carrying the same memory, the same rage. The galaxy watched in silence. On alien worlds far away, screens flickered with the sight of Earth's fleet rising. Leaders whispered in council halls, asking each other if humanity had gone mad, but others shivered, for they remembered old rumors that when humans fought, they did not stop until the enemy was ash. As the fleet accelerated into the void, Admiral Karan closed his eyes for one brief moment. He thought of the old colonies lost, of the families broken, of the ashes scattered across forgotten worlds. Then he opened them, his gaze sharp as blades of fire. "This time," he said softly, almost to himself, "there will be no silence after the storm." And with that, the fleet vanished into the dark, carrying the weight of humanity's past, carrying the fury of a people who never moved on. The storm was coming, and the galaxy could already feel the first winds, echoes of old wounds. Fleet cut through the void, silent and vast, thousands of human warships moving as one. Each vessel carried not just soldiers, but memories. Memories of stories whispered by grandparents, tales of burning skies, screams cut short, and silence that followed after. The galaxy had moved on, but humanity never did. On the flagship Vanguard, Admiral Karan stood before the long star map, tracing the path toward the ruined world. Around him, his officers worked quietly, yet their faces carried the same shadow, the same fire. Every person aboard knew why they were here. They were not only answering a call for help, they were answering their own past. In the council's grand chamber far away, panic spread. Ambassadors shouted at each other, accusing, blaming, terrified of what humanity's defiance might bring. "They cannot fight them," one cried, his scales shivering with fear. "If the predators rise again, we are doomed. Humanity will awaken a storm none of us can contain." But others, quieter, remembered whispers from centuries ago, whispers that humanity had once stood against the predators and survived, though at a terrible cost. Back on the Vanguard, Captain Lyra, one of Karan's oldest comrades, approached him. She was stern, scarred by years of battle, her voice low but steady. "Do you think they know, Admiral? Do you think the younger ones understand what we are walking into?" Karan's eyes darkened. "They don't need to know," he said, his tone heavy. "They only need to feel what we feel. They carry it in their blood. The past is in them even if they never lived it." Silence hung between them. Broken only by the steady hum of the engines, Karan remembered his own father, a miner on one of the lost colonies, who had survived when the predators came. He remembered his father's stories, how the sky burned, how neighbors vanished in smoke, how screams echoed in empty streets, and how the council told them afterward to forget, to move on, to bury it, but humans never buried it. In the lower decks, soldiers prepared their gear, young recruits who had grown up hearing bedtime, stories that were not stories at all. One soldier, Jaren, held a small locket with a faded picture inside. His grandmother, who had been on one of those colonies, she had told him, before she died, never to trust the council, never to forgive the silence of the galaxy. Now her words burned inside him like a second heart. The fleet pressed deeper into the void, approaching the coordinates of the signal. The stars grew cold, darker, as if even light feared this place. Suddenly, the long-range scanners picked up wreckage, massive debris fields drifting endlessly, shattered cruisers, broken stations, the remains of a civilization torn apart. Gasps spread through the crews as the images filled their screens. But for humans, it was not shock, it was recognition. They had seen this before. Karan's voice cut through the silence. "Record everything. Send nothing to the council. Not until we know the truth." The officers obeyed, their faces pale, but steady. It was clear now. The distress call had come from a world already dying. Then another signal broke through the static, weaker, almost a whisper. "Please, please anyone, they are still here." The bridge froze. The voice was alive, survivors hiding somewhere below the shattered surface. Karan clenched his jaw. "Set course. Prepare landing detachments. We're going down." But as the fleet adjusted, a shadow appeared on the far edge of the system. Massive, dark, unnatural. The Predator fleet, long thought gone, emerged from the void like a nightmare returning. Dozens of ships, sleek and sharp, their hulls absorbing light. Their formations spread across the stars like black wings. Gasps filled the human bridge. Some of the younger officers whispered in fear, but Karan's voice cut through the dread. "So the ghosts return," he said coldly. "This is the enemy the galaxy chose to forget. But we never did." A deep silence followed, until Captain Lyra stepped forward, her voice low. "They told us to move on," she said, her eyes fixed on the Predator fleet. "But Admiral, we never moved on." The words hung heavy in the air. The past was not just memory, it was alive again right before them. The galaxy had hoped this day would never come, but humanity had always known it would. And now, they were ready. The fleet, tightened formation, shields raised, weapons powered, soldiers strapped in, breathing hard, hearts pounding. The Predators moved with terrifying grace, spreading across the stars. But humanity did not flinch. They remembered the scars. They carried the old wounds, and now they were ready to repay them. The silence of space deepened, broken only by the sound of alarms and engines. And in that silence, humanity stood tall, facing the enemy once thought unbeatable. For others, it was the return of a nightmare. For humanity, it was unfinished business. And as the two fleets faced each other in the dark void, Admiral Corrin whispered, his voice carrying the weight of centuries, "This is where the storm begins." The broken world. The human fleet entered the system slowly, drifting past the shattered remains of once proud stations. The wreckage told a story without words. Cities in orbit torn apart, colonies turned to drifting bones of metal. Everywhere. They looked. The silence of death filled the void. For other species it would be horror, but for humanity, it was memory. Admiral Corrin stood at the bridge of the Vanguard, his eyes scanning the broken world below. Its surface was scarred. Blackened craters stretched across the continents, glowing faintly with heat. This was no ordinary attack, it was extermination, precise and merciless. He knew that sight, for his people had once seen the same fate. "Life signs detected," an officer called out, voice sharp with urgency. The room shifted, tension tightening like a coiled spring. Corrin's gaze locked on the coordinates deep beneath the ruined surface. Bunkers, hidden caverns, desperate survivors clinging to what little remained. "Open a channel," Corrin ordered. Static filled the air, then a voice broke through, weak and broken. You actually came. They told us no one would answer. No one would ever come." The voice belonged to an alien elder, trembling, breath ragged. "They burned our skies. They swallowed our cities. We hid. But they will return." Corrin's jaw tightened. "Who are they?" he asked, though deep down he already knew. The answer came like a whisper of death. "They are the ones your people fought long ago, the Devourers, the Shadow Fleet. They have returned." The bridge went cold. Younger officers stiffened, older veterans lowered their heads. Every human there felt the weight of that word, returned. The galaxy had buried the truth, called it myth. But here it was, alive again, written in fire on the surface of this broken world. Captain Lyra's eyes narrowed as she leaned closer to Corrin. "They will never stop," she said quietly. "Not until every world is ash. You know that as well as I do." Corrin nodded, slowly, "Yes, and that is why we cannot leave. We cannot move on, not this time." On the ground below, a landing party prepared to descend. Dropships lined up, soldiers strapping on their armor, their expressions grim. Among them was Jaren, the young soldier. With his grandmother's locket, he tightened it in his hand, whispering to her memory, "Your fight is my fight now." The dropships roared through the burning skies. As they descended, they passed over oceans turned black with ash, mountains scarred with glass, forests reduced to skeletons of charred wood. Every sight screamed of a people hunted, a world left to die. Yet even in this ruin, life clung stubbornly. Survivors huddled in caverns, eyes wide with both hope and terror. The first landing was tense, weapons raised, soldiers moving carefully. From the shadows of a collapsed bunker, survivors emerged, their faces gaunt, their movements weak. A child clung to the leg of the elder who had spoken before, her eyes huge and haunted. When she saw the armored humans, she did not run. She reached out, whispering, "Are you real?" One of the soldiers knelt, lowering his weapon. "Yes," he said softly, We are real, and we are here to help." The child broke into tears, clutching his arm as if afraid he would vanish. But before hope could take root, the ground shook. A deep rumble rolled through the earth, cracks splitting across the ruined city. In the distance, dark shapes rose into the sky, black metal wings unfurling. The predators had returned. "Contact," the comms officer shouted. Dozens of enemy craft emerged, sleek and jagged, their weapons glowing with deadly light. The soldiers tightened formation, shielding the survivors as alarms screamed. Corin's voice thundered over the comms. "Hold the line, protect them, do not give an inch." The first strike came like lightning, enemy blasts tearing through the ruins, sending fire and stone into the air. Humans fired back, rail cannons roaring, missiles streaking through the sky. The city became a storm of fire, chaos and fury clashing in brutal waves. But even as the enemy pressed, the humans held, refusing to retreat. Jaren stood firm, his rifle blazing, the locket pressed against his armor. His grandmother's voice echoed in his mind. "Never forgive, never forget." And with every shot, he carried those words like fire. The predators fought with cold precision, their ships cutting through the skies, their soldiers moving like shadows. But humanity fought with rage, with memory, with a wound that had never healed. Every strike was fueled by generations of grief. Every push was driven by refusal to let the past repeat. From orbit, Admiral Karan watched the battle unfold, his eyes grim. He knew this was only the beginning, a test, a taste of what was coming. The predators had returned not for one world but for all, and if the galaxy remained silent again, then humanity would fight alone. But as fire rained and screams filled the broken world, Corin whispered to himself, "No, we are not alone, not this time, because we never moved on." The broken world burned, but in its fire, a truth became clear. This was not just a rescue. This was the opening of an old war, a war the galaxy wanted to forget, but humanity had been waiting for. The silence before the storm was gone. Now the storm had arrived. Shadows of the enemy. The skies above the broken world burned with fire. Human dropships weaved through falling debris as predator craft descended in endless waves. The ruins shook with each strike, and the survivors huddled in terror as the ground cracked beneath them. But the humans did not retreat. They stood firm, their weapons roaring like thunder. On the vanguard, Admiral Corin watched the enemy fleet unfold across the stars. Dozens, no, hundreds of predator ships slid from the void, black hulls absorbing. The light, their edges sharp as blades, they moved like a swarm, spreading across the system with precision, sealing every escape route. Corin's officers stared in silence, hearts heavy with dread. Never had they seen an enemy so vast, so calculated. It was not an army, it was a storm. "Admiral, enemy numbers surpass expectations," a young officer said, voice shaking. Corin's eyes narrowed, his voice calm and steady. "Of course they do. They always come in shadows, always more than what we think." He leaned closer to the display, his eyes cold steel. "But this time, we are ready." Orders spread like fire, human ships shifting into attack. Formations. The fleet tightened, lines of destroyers braced ahead of carriers, gunships swarming into position. Every hull gleamed with the scars of human design, reinforced, brutal, built not for elegance but survival. The galaxy had mocked these ships for years, calling them crude, outdated, Death-world toys. Now the galaxy would see what Death-world toys could do. The predators struck first, a rain of energy beams slashing across the human lines. 2 destroyers vanished in an instant, their hulls breaking apart into burning fragments. The bridge of the vanguard shook as shields absorbed the first barrage. Yet the humans did not break. They fired back. Railguns screamed across the void, hurling slugs at speeds no shield could fully absorb. Predator hulls cracked, their sleek forms torn open, explosions ripping through their formations. Missile barrages followed, thousands of warheads streaking like falling stars. The void lit with fire, predator ships scattering to avoid the rain of destruction. "Push them," Karan commanded, his voice calm but fierce. "Do not give them space, choke them in their own storm." The humans surged forward, their carriers launching wave after wave of fighters, tiny sparks compared to the Predator's vast wings, but each spark burned with Deathworld fury. The fighters darted between Predator ships, striking engines, tearing weapons apart, where precision failed they rammed, turning themselves into fire to take the enemy down. On the surface, Jaren and his squad fought through collapsing ruins. Enemy soldiers moved through the smoke, tall, skeletal, their armor black as shadow. They struck with blades of energy, cutting through stone as if it were air. Jaren met one head-on, his rifle blazing. The creature fell, but two more stepped from the smoke. He clenched his grandmother's locket tight and roared, firing until his weapon overheated. He refused to fall, not here, not when humanity had come so far. Above, Captain. Lyra stood at the secondary fleet command, her voice sharp as steel. They want to bury us with numbers, she said. But they forgot something important. Her eyes blazed as she gave the order, humans don't stop. The Predator fleet began to bend under the human assault. Their sleek precision faltered against the relentless hammer of human tactics. Where Predators struck with speed, humans answered with sheer endurance. Ships that should have broken apart kept fighting. Crews patched holes with their own bodies, refusing to abandon their posts. But then the shadow appeared. From the void, a ship unlike the others emerged, massive and silent. The Predator mothership, larger than any human carrier, darker than the space around it. Its hull shimmered with strange energy, and its weapons glowed like dying suns. The bridge of the Vanguard fell into silence as its true size filled the display. It was not a ship. It was a world killer. Corin's voice dropped to a whisper, but it carried across the bridge like thunder, so the old nightmare still breathes. The mothership shifted, its weapons charging. The first blast fired, a beam of pure light tearing across the void. 3 human ships vanished in a single strike, their crews gone without a scream. Shock rippled through the fleet, but Corin did not flinch. He turned to his officers, his voice like fire. This is why we came, this is why we never forgot. This is the storm we were born for. His words steadied them, fear turning into fury. If the galaxy trembled at the sight of the mothership, humanity burned with rage. The admiral raised his hand. Signal the fleet, every ship, he ordered. Tell them this, humanity never moved on, and tonight we prove it. The humans roared, into the comms, voices uniting across thousands of ships, soldiers, pilots, captains, engineers, each one ready to bleed, ready to fight. The galaxy might see shadows of the enemy, but the Predators would see something else. They would see the fire of a species that refused to die, the fire of humanity. The battle was not just for the broken world below, not just for the survivors hiding in caverns. It was for the past, for the colonies lost, for the families broken by silence. Every railgun fired with memory, every missile screamed with rage, and as the fleets clashed, the void itself seemed to tremble. The shadows of the enemy had returned, but humanity was no longer the same. This time, the galaxy would learn what it meant when humans said, "We never moved on." The price of memory. The battle raged like a storm that would never end. Human ships tore through the void, firing railguns and missiles with relentless fury. Predator. Vessels fell one after another, but for every enemy ship destroyed, another seemed to appear. The dark swarm moved like an ocean of shadows, endless and merciless. On the surface, Jaren and his squad fought through collapsing ruins, shielding survivors as Predator soldiers advanced. Every street was fire, every corner smoke. The child he had sworn to protect clung to him as he fired again and again, his weapon shaking in his hands. When a Predator warrior lunged at him with a blade of light, Jaren blocked it with his rifle, sparks showering across the broken ground. He screamed and drove his knife into the creature's neck, refusing to let her see him fall. Above, the Vanguard shook violently as the mothership fired again. A massive beam carved through space, vaporizing 3 human carriers in a single strike. Hundreds of lives gone in seconds. The bridge fell silent for a breath, then filled with voices of officers shouting to keep formation. The cost was rising, and everyone knew it. "Admiral, we are losing ships too quickly," Captain Lyra warned, her voice hard but urgent. We can't keep trading lives like this. Corin's eyes stayed on the mothership, unblinking. This is what they want, to break us with fear, to make us step back, he said coldly. Do you see fear in me? Captain? She met his gaze and shook her head. No, Admiral. Then remind every ship why we are here, he said, voice steel. We are here because we never forgot. The message spread across the fleet. Captains repeated it to their crews. Soldiers whispered it to each other over the comms. We never forgot. It became a fire in their hearts, burning stronger than the fear of death. But fire alone could not shield them. In one strike, a Predator cruiser rammed into a human destroyer, both ships exploding in a ball of flame. In another, fighters were shredded in the crossfire, their pilots' final screams echoing in silence. Blood and fire marked every victory, every step forward paid for with lives. One ship, the Resolute, was caught in the mothership's path. Its captain, an old veteran named Harrow, realized escape was impossible. The beam was charging again, the light swelling with power. He looked at his crew, faces pale, eyes wide. We're not running, he said quietly. If we must fall, we fall, giving them pain. The Resolute charged engines to full, speeding straight toward the mothership. Enemy fire ripped into its hull, tearing chunks away, but still it pushed forward. Inside, alarms blared, flames spread, and yet the crew shouted in unison. For Earth, for the colonies, for the past. With a final burst of power, the Resolute slammed into the mothership's armor, detonating its reactors. The explosion ripped across the giant vessel's surface, fire swallowing half of its flank. The mothership staggered, shields flickering. Human ships roared in triumph, their cheers carried across comms like thunder. On the ground, Jaren felt the blast shake the Earth itself. The Predators faltered, their discipline broken for a moment. He seized the chance, rallying his squad, pushing them forward. We fight for them, for all of them, he shouted, his voice raw. The survivors clung to hope again, seeing the humans bleed but not fall. Back in orbit, Karan gripped the rail of the bridge, his eyes fixed on the wounded mothership. The cost was heavy, too heavy. But this sacrifice had shown something powerful. Humanity was not just fighting. Humanity was willing to give everything. That was what the Predators never understood. That was what the Council had always feared. Captain Lyra turned to Corin, her face pale but her voice steady. They will throw everything at us now, she said. Yes, Corin replied softly, and we will give them everything we are. More human ships fell, more names burned into the lists of the dead. But for every ship lost, humanity struck back harder. They fought not just with weapons but with memory. Every scar of the past was now a weapon, every story of loss a blade. The galaxy watched in silence. Across distant worlds, leaders trembled as they saw humanity refuse to break. For the first time in centuries, whispers spread again. Perhaps the humans are the only ones who can stop them. The battle raged on, both sides bleeding into the void. But in the fire and death, a truth burned brighter than all else. Humanity would never stop, never bend, never forget, because for them, this was not only war, this was memory, this was justice, this was the price of wounds that had never healed. And as the mothership turned its massive guns once more, Corin whispered into the silence of his bridge, "They think we will break, they think we will run, but they don't understand." His eyes burned as the stars lit with fire. We never moved on, and that is why we will win. The shattered galaxy. The void burned with fire, wreckage drifting like broken stars. Human ships and Predator ships, alike scattered across the battlefield. The fight had dragged into endless hours, yet still humanity held. They bled, they lost, but they never broke. The Predator mothership loomed above, wounded but alive. Its hull burned in places where the Resolute had struck, but its massive weapons still glowed with power. Each blast it fired tore human ships apart, turning hundreds of lives into ash in seconds. And yet, the humans pressed forward, ships limping, shields cracked, hulls bleeding smoke. They did not stop. On the vanguard, Admiral Corin stood tall, exhaustion pulling at every face around him. Officers whispered casualty reports, whole squadrons gone, carriers lost. Still, his gaze stayed on the great predator vessel. He felt the weight of his people's past pressing on his shoulders. This was not just a battle. This was history, demanding to be answered. Captain Lyra's voice cut through the tense air. "Admiral, if we keep trading blows like this, we will not survive, not even long enough to save the survivors below." Her words were truth, sharp and heavy. Corin did not argue. He only turned toward the far end of the chamber, where a locked console waited. The officers glanced at it with unease, for they all knew what it meant. The console bore the seal of Earth Defense Command. It controlled weapons hidden for centuries, weapons humanity had sworn never to use. The Council had demanded they be buried, outlawed, destroyed, but humanity had kept them hidden in silence, waiting for the day when silence was no longer enough. Corin pressed his hand against the console, the lock releasing with a hiss. "Prepare the dark arsenal," he ordered. The bridge froze, shock rippling through the crew. One officer whispered, "Admiral, if we use those, the Council will brand us monsters." Corin's eyes turned cold. "Let them," he said. "They already branded us troublemakers, savages, deathworlders, but the galaxy is still alive because we carry what others fear." The hangars of hidden carriers opened, and from their bellies the dark arsenal was unleashed. Not sleek weapons of elegance, but brutal machines of war, planet crackers, kinetic spears the size of towers, swarms of autonomous hunter drones, all painted in the black and red of Earth's deepest silence. The Predator fleet shifted as the first of these weapons roared into the void. The galaxy watched through transmissions, alien leaders staring in horror as humanity revealed what it had hidden. They had mocked humans for building weapons far beyond their need. Now they understood. Humans had never built for peace. They had built for this day. The first kinetic spear struck, a rod of dense alloy hurled at near light speed. It tore through a Predator cruiser like paper, exploding into fragments that ripped apart 3 more ships. The mothership reeled as hunter drones swarmed across its hull, burrowing into armor, detonating from within. Fire spread across the massive vessel, its shields buckling under the assault. "Admiral," Captain Lyra said, her voice almost a whisper, "they will never see us the same after this." Corin did not turn, his gaze fixed on the collapsing enemy fleet. "Good," he said. "Let them see the truth. Let them fear us, because we never moved on." On the surface, survivors lifted, their heads as the sky lit with fire. They saw Predator ships falling like dying stars, raining wreckage across the horizon. For the first time, hope surged in their eyes. They saw humans not as distant strangers, but as saviors carved from fire. Jaren and his squad cheered as the Predator soldiers faltered. The enemy who had once moved like shadows now stumbled, their discipline broken. Jaren raised his rifle to the sky, shouting over the roar of battle. "They thought we forgot. They thought we would hide. But humanity remembers." The Predators began to retreat, their formation shattering. Even the mothership, burning and crippled, turned away, engines flaring as it fled into the void. For the first time in centuries, the Predators ran, and for the first time, the galaxy saw what it truly meant to awaken humanity's wrath. But the victory came with silence. Hundreds of human ships were gone, millions dead, entire squadrons erased, entire families left with only memory. The galaxy might have seen power, but the humans saw the cost. On the Vanguard, Corin looked at the casualty list scrolling endlessly across the display. Every name a story, every name a sacrifice. He closed his eyes, pain heavy in his chest, but when he opened them, fire still burned. "This is what it means to remember," he whispered. "This is the price of memory, and we will pay it. Until the end." The galaxy trembled at what it had seen. Whispers spread across worlds and councils. The humans unleashed weapons the council forbade. The humans shattered the Predators when no one else dared. The humans never moved on, and as the fleet gathered itself, battered but unbroken, "Admiral," Corin turned toward the stars where the Predators had fled. "They will come again," he said softly. his voice like iron. And when they do, we will be ready. The galaxy had been shattered that day, not just by the predators, but by the truth. Humanity was no longer just a voice at the table, no longer the mocked Deathworlders. They were the storm, the fire, the memory that refused to die. And the galaxy now knew. When humans said they never moved on, they meant it. Humanity never let go. The battlefield drifted in silence. Wreckage floated among the stars, glowing with fire as broken ships turned slowly in the void. The Predator fleet had retreated, their shadow torn apart by the fury of humans. But victory tasted like ash, because the cost was written in the dead. On the Vanguard, the bridge was quiet. The hum of the engines, the crackle of damaged systems, and the faint cries of wounded crew echoed through the halls. Admiral Corrin stood still, his eyes locked on the long list of names scrolling across the display. So many lives gone, so many ships lost. But his gaze did not waver. For every name was proof of what humanity was willing to give. Captain Lyra broke the silence, her voice steady but heavy. Admiral, the survivors on the surface have been secured. They are safe. They owe their lives to us. Her words were true, yet there was no pride in her tone, only the weight of the dead. Corrin nodded slowly, his hand closing into a fist. They live because our people remembered what the galaxy wanted to forget, he said, and that is enough. On the surface, the survivors wept as human soldiers led them from the ruins. Children clung to armored legs. Elders bowed their heads in silence. They saw not only warriors but ghosts of fire who had come from across the stars to fight when no one else would. To them, humanity was not just saviors. They were vengeance itself. Jaren stood among them, his rifle cracked, his armor scarred. He held his grandmother's locket in his hand, staring up at the burning sky. He whispered, voice hoarse but proud, "We did it. We kept the promise." He looked at the child he had protected, who now smiled through her tears. In that moment he understood. This was why humanity never let go. The transmissions of the battle spread across the galaxy. Every council, every government, every race saw what had unfolded. They saw Predator fleets shattered, but they also saw the terrible cost humanity had paid. They saw weapons the council had forbidden, unleashed without hesitation. And they saw something that unsettled them most of all. They saw that humanity did not fight for power or for conquest. They fought because they remembered. Whispers spread across alien worlds. The humans will never move on. They will carry the scars forever. Some voices were filled with fear, others with awe. But all agreed on one thing: humanity could never again be ignored. In the council chambers, panic and silence clashed. Some demanded that humanity be punished for unleashing their hidden arsenal. They are dangerous, uncontrollable. They must be restrained, they cried. But others lowered their voices, whispering what none dared admit aloud. They are the only ones who stood, the only ones who fought. If they fall, we all fall. Back on the Vanguard, Admiral Corrin addressed the fleet. His voice carried across every surviving ship. He did not speak with pride. He did not speak with triumph. He spoke with the weight of memory. We came because no one else would. We fought because no one else could. We bled because the galaxy told us to forget, he said. His eyes were sharp as steel as he continued. But we never forgot and we never moved on. That is who we are and that is who we will always be. The crews across the fleet stood in silence, their hearts heavy, but their resolve unshaken. They had lost so much, but they had won something greater. They had reminded the galaxy that humanity was not a species that let wounds fade. They turned scars into weapons, grief into strength, memory into fire. As the fleet prepared to leave, Corrin turned to Captain Lyra. "They will come again," he said softly, his eyes on the dark stretch of stars where the predators had fled. "They will not stop, not until the galaxy is ash." Lyra nodded, her voice hard. "Then we will not stop either. Not until they are gone forever." Jaren stood with the survivors as the ships lifted into orbit. The child who had once asked if the humans were real now waved as the dropships departed. Her small voice echoed in his mind. You came when no one else would. Those words stayed with him, carved into his soul, for that was the truth of humanity. When others turned away, humans stepped forward. The galaxy was shattered, not only by the predators, but by the revelation of what humanity truly was. They were not monsters, though some would call them that. They were not saviors, though some would worship them as such. They were memory, living memory, the fire that never went out. As the Vanguard set course for Earth, Admiral Karan stood one last time before the stars, his voice low, almost a whisper but filled with iron. We never moved on, he said, and because of that we are still here. And the galaxy, watching in silence, finally understood. Humanity had not just survived, humanity had never let go, and that was what made them unstoppable.